This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
Attempted murder charge. A woman accused of stabbing a 6-year-old child multiple times appears in court.
Access to information. Critics push back on the Houston government bill to give public bodies more power to deny requests.
And who loves a good kitchen party? The Nickersons sure do.
Southerly winds will have temperatures on the rise into Tuesday, which will be a very spring-like day across the province. Your full forecast is coming up.
Halifax police are investigating a shocking incident from the weekend that left a 6-year-old boy seriously injured in hospital. Police say the little boy was stabbed in a knife attack downtown on Sunday afternoon.
A 19-year-old woman who was arrested at the scene is now facing charges of attempted murder. And as Gareth Hampshire tells us, it's not the first time she's been in trouble.
It was here in the area of this bus shelter on Barrington Street in downtown Halifax where a 6-year-old boy was stabbed multiple times. He was taken to hospital with what police described as life-threatening injuries. He remains there, but there is no update on his condition.
Oh, it's very, very tragic. It's a very, very tragic incident.
There's no sign of this being a crime scene today, but it was right around this area where police say the attack happened just after 1 o'clock. People who were there at the time called police, and officers were able to arrest a 19-year-old woman within minutes. Police say the boy's parent helped make sure the suspect did not leave the scene, as well as playing a role in getting their son immediate medical attention. The woman who's been charged has been identified as Elliot Chorney, who appeared in court today. She's known to police because of a previous incident that was alleged in January at the QE2 hospital. The doctor involved is not commenting.
Back in January, the accused in this matter was charged with assault, but that matters before the courts, so I would not be able to speak to it any further.
Police do not think Chorney knew the victim. She's charged with attempted murder and possession of a weapon. She was remanded in custody until another hearing in March after the Crown opposed her release.
I confirm the Public Prosecution Service works every day to protect the public by applying the law, the criminal code, and is going to continue to do so in the future.
The transit union says what happened is another example of why additional security is needed around bus shelters.
But the fact that it happened in broad daylight is a lot of concern.
He says measures have reduced incidents at the Lacewood and Dartmouth bridge terminals and thinks it's time to consider patrols at Scotia Square.
I'd love to see a security guard or a supervisor that's stationed there all day to be able to walk the terminal. That kind of a presence helps deter a lot of things from happening.
Police say their investigation's in its early stages and are asking anyone who was in the area and saw anything or has video or dash cam footage to contact them. Gareth Hampshire, CBC News, Halifax.
Police say a 28-year-old snowmobiler has died after he was hit by a fire truck that was called to help him. RCMP were called to a crash in Collingwood Corner on Friday night. Officers learned that a man from Spring Hill was driving a snowmobile when it went off the road and hit a snowbank. The driver was then hit by a fire truck on the scene. He was pronounced dead a short time later. RCMP say drugs and alcohol are not believed to be a factor in regards to the fire truck driver and that the road was covered in snow at the time.
3 men from Alberta are facing murder charges after a fatal shooting in Whitney Pier this weekend. Cape Breton Regional Police were called to this home on Shore Road after gunshots were heard early Saturday morning. An emergency alert was sent out around 2:45 a.m. Police say a man was spotted running from the residence before departing in a white truck. Police attempted to stop the truck, which was then abandoned. 3 men fled to a nearby wooded area, and after a search involving canine units and a drone, they were found in an apartment complex. Police say 44-year-old Jeffrey Pearson died in the shooting. Police who live in the area say it's left them shaken.
The person who was deceased, he was very popular in the community, well known to everyone, into sports, family man. It's sad to know that there are 3 children now without their father. That's the saddest part.
All 3 men charged have been remanded to the Cape Breton Correctional Centre, and police say they believe the shooting was an isolated incident.
All right, let's get a quick check on the weather. Here's Ryan.
You were talking about a little spring-like step in the air for Tuesday.
Yeah, absolutely. Tuesday is definitely going to be a mild day, the mildest we've seen in weeks, really. And when we couple that with some sunshine, it is going to be a fine-looking day across the province. Now, we will see some light snow mixed with some showers across New Brunswick and into northern parts of the province overnight for the Valley and Colchester-Cumberland, the Northumberland Shore, and into Cape Breton and the Northumberland Shore. It will linger into the early morning hours of Tuesday. That will clear, and then temperatures will pop in southwest winds, which will still be gusting in the 40 to 50 kilometer per hour range, so a bit breezy, but we'll take it. And those temps awfully nice, 6, 7, 8, maybe even 9 degrees in the Valley. There's the little brief shot coming in along the warm front, but again, nothing to be concerned about. We're into the great mild temperatures for Tuesday afternoon. And then we're watching our next system, which will have some rain involved for Cape Breton and into even mainland Nova Scotia, some showers on the edge of this, so more mild weather. And yes, if you listen closely, you can hear those ice chippers chipping away, which they will continue to do over the next couple of days.
That's a lot of it.
Okay, thanks so much, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Proponents of access to information in Nova Scotia are still recovering from the shock of last week's surprise omnibus bill. The province introduced changes that would give public bodies more power to refuse document requests. Angela McIver has more.
When someone files a Freedom of Information request in Nova Scotia, often there's a discussion that follows between the requester and the public body. Sometimes the timeline is narrowed down or the application is refined to be more specific. But if proposed legislation is passed, that back and forth could simply go away. Changes to the legislation tabled last week at Province House would give public bodies the power to refuse Freedom of Information requests that are considered trivial, frivolous, or vexatious. Repetitive, excessively broad, or applications not made in good faith could also be denied. In the last year, the province says approximately 16% of requests fell under this category. The move is to help enable a more effective use of resources, according to the Department of Justice. But Toby Mendel of the Centre for Law and Democracy says in his experience, the amount of vexatious requests has been tiny. He's concerned with the direction of the Houston government and its supermajority.
Rolling back the act instead of improving it. And I have to ask myself, what's motivating them to do that? When you already have that much power, you should be absolutely respectful of democratic checks and balances and not trying to kind of hobble them or undermine them. To me, it's a really unfortunate sign, and I'm worried about it.
Nova Scotia's Information and Privacy Commissioner Tricia Ralph says she was not aware these changes were coming. She says her office is now in the process of doing its own analysis. In the past, the Information and Privacy Commissioner has been supportive of denying abusive requests with the caveat that she is the one to decide. That's how it's done in New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and BC. But Nova Scotia is following Alberta, the most restrictive Freedom of Information model in the country, ensuring the commissioner can only review files with no binding authority. Angela McIver, CBC News, Halifax.
And still with the Houston government, the Premier says he's withdrawing legislation that would have given him the power to fire Nova Scotia's Auditor General without cause. The legislation would also have allowed the province to make reports from the office private. The Premier says after discussions with the Auditor General, he no longer supports proposed changes to the Act. Houston said in a release that he has nothing but respect for the Auditor General.
Advocates across Nova Scotia have been calling for urgent action on intimate partner violence. Many have been saying more needs to be done to prevent violence in the first place, including a hard look at the role for men. Shayna Luck has that story.
No more silence! No. These advocates want steps taken immediately to stop intimate partner violence, including funding for organizations that do prevention work. Among those making requests, a small group in Pictou County that has done group counseling for abusive men for nearly 40 years.
We need to speak more. We need to talk about our feelings. We need to talk about what we're going through and not just bottle it all up and become angry.
Borden's organization received almost $359,000 from the province last year to do their work. But he says it's not enough. He believes they need to more than double their funding. He says the organization has never had as many new intakes as they did last year, almost 120 men. He believes the staff of 4 do not have the capacity to respond.
And I think now is the time that the government and all the departments need to take this seriously and take a look at, okay, what is the root cause? The root cause of gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, is men.
The Department of Opportunities and Social Development spent just over $4 million on intervention programs for men this fiscal year. Another program told me it's significant that some of this money can be used to direct men towards housing and job security.
He needs often a lot of support in terms of the infrastructure of his life to help support the changes that he wants to make and to stay away from the desperation and the despair that leads you into that I don't care space, which is, the space where men can be very destructive.
The minister involved says increasing support is on the government's radar, though he didn't say by how much.
And we're going to take each and every application we get for expanded services under advisement, and we're going to give it some serious thought, calculation, and do what we can.
Armstrong said the application from Borden's organization in Pictou County is under review. He added his office has received requests from the metro area and outside it. Shayna Luck, CBC News, Halifax.
All right, well, kitchen parties are a Canadian pastime with deep roots here on the East Coast, of course. They're all about songs shared with friends.
Yes, and they're how one Nova Scotia couple, both now in their 90s, have celebrated their love of music and community over the years. Have a look.
1, 2, 3. I think that's what a kitchen party means, is making people happy.
Nice to see you all, and we're going to open our kitchen party with the kitchen party song, Indeed. Everybody sing.
And we started this kitchen party about 14 and a half years ago.
We just call it the Pembroke Kitchen Party.
Oh, I thought it was Arnold and Pauline's kitchen party.
Well, they have put that title to it, but we don't.
We put a picture on the wall with our name on it. The first time I got a check, I sent to Sears and bought myself a guitar. So I taught myself how to play, and I taught my husband how to play, but he picked up a lot more after that.
When we were courting, where she worked in town, they had a small space in the backyard that was all boarded in. And I used to carry my little guitar sometimes, and we'd go out in that garden and sing some songs in the evening.
Pretty well knew almost every one of Hank Snow's songs, and he used to yodel too. He'd sing me some love songs.
Well, we went together for 5 years before we were married, and we've been married 72, so we're quite used to each other.
You don't go to Mom's on Thursday because they're getting ready for the kitchen party. It started really small, and over the years, more people heard about it. This is their highlight of the week. Probably for most people here it is.
These are my friends, my musical friends. I just live for Thursday night. I was invited to a kitchen party, I suppose 12 years ago or so. When all them guitars came on, I was hooked, just like that. And what I did is sell my motorcycle and bought a guitar.
Just wonderful to see the older generation having a place to go on Thursday night. And as you've seen, some come early to get their spot. The collage that we have there's people there that we can only remember now because they're gone, right? So, but they're there. They were part of us.
We still love to come up here and sing. We have a lot of good friends that come and listen to the music, and I think they go home just to tapping their toes and clapping their hands. It makes them happy. So that's what it's all about, is making our seniors happy. And we love them all.
Well, there's a familiar spot.
And doesn't the sun make everyone feel better on a day like today?
It
Gorgeous.
certainly does. Beautiful there at Peggy's Cove. Ryan's up next with his full weather forecast. We'll see you in just a few minutes. Welcome back. Okay, Ryan, before we get to your forecast, we wanted to show you this next story from Sable Island.
Yes, researchers are trying to understand how seal pups on Sable Island develop the ability to survive. So they've put Fitbit-style monitors on 6 seal pups to track their heart rate and activity level. The animals were sedated while the devices were glued onto their fur. The monitors can collect data for up to 9 days, and because of the harsh conditions, up to 90% of baby seals on Sable Island die in their first year.
All the animals have to compete for limited food resources. So we start to see the impacts of that pretty early on in pups because they're just not as good divers and as good at getting food as the adults. And so understanding who's going to be surviving out there, what gives pups the edge to sustain these populations is going to be really important.
Shiro hopes to expand the project next year and monitor more pups and their mothers.
All right, yeah, so, weather on Sable Island can be nasty these times of year, windy
definitely.
and so on, but beautiful day in this part of Nova Scotia for sure.
Tuesday sounds like it's going to be just spectacular
Yeah,
for,
it really
for
is.
February. You know.
For February, yeah. I mean, I was just looking back at the numbers over the last month. Like, you know, the only really warm up we've had this month was overnight, where we got to like 6-7 degrees. Have to go all the way back over a month ago before we to a Sunday, I believe around the 20th of January, where we had, you know, mid-single digit temperatures.
We were due.
We're long
This is the ice
overdue.
age we've been living in.
Yes,
right? A little bit.
definitely. Just there hasn't really been too many breaks. So have a look at our high temperatures today. Not doing too bad, and we will continue to see those temps rising for Tuesday. And yes, 2 degrees on the plus side downtown Halifax, 4 at Back Row. That was our hot spot today. And yeah, Camp and the Caribou Point Station below the freezing mark. But you can see those temperatures right now cooling off as expected. So we will drop this evening into the early overnight before the temperatures rise again, as these southerly winds will start to usher in these milder temperatures. Sustained in the 20 range right now down through the south and west, Beaver Island at 30, and we're going to continue to see those winds from the southwest in that range overnight, seeing some gusts to 30 right now and through the Digby Neck area. This is the warm frontal boundary that is going to be bringing in that mix of some snow and rain, primarily to New Brunswick. We're just going to get the northern tip, the southern tip of that front, I should say, for northern areas of Nova Scotia overnight, and that could bring a few flakes with it. Now, back off into the south and west, this is the cold front that will then eventually usher in a little bit more in the way of some wintry mix to the Maritimes, but for the most part, it's going to be rain thanks to this system, which will kind of ride up and catch a ride on this cold front as it moves through the province. We'll walk you all through this in just a moment. Let's have a look at temperatures, and you can see a little taste of spring-like temperatures across much of Canada right now, including Calgary at 10, Edmonton at 8, Toronto at 7, Thunder Bay at 5. So we will not be alone in this little brief reprieve. Have a look at temperatures for tonight. And again, we will drop into the -1 to -4 range, -6 to 7, 8 across Cape Breton. And then that southerly wind, which will be gusting 40 to 50 kilometers per hour, will bump those temperatures up. So there's the mix moving through New Brunswick, Amherst, Cumberland, and across into the Pictou, Antigonish, and Cape Breton areas for Tuesday morning. That's going to be our greatest chance of seeing a few flakes, wet flakes in the morning. Notice temperatures are back on near the freezing mark by the time we get to 6-7 a.m. and then those temperatures rising into the afternoon as that sun will pop through in a solid mix of sun and cloud. Canadian model a little bit more bullish, showing mostly sunny skies, and we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. But I think a solid mix of sun and cloud looking a little more likely at this point, but temperatures are going to be really quite mild indeed. We're going to be 6, 7, and 8 degrees across Cape Breton. Those winds from the southwest, gusting 40 to 50 kilometers per hour, will be back in the 7 to 8 range across the Northumberland shore. And yes, in through the central areas of the province as well. Looking like a fine day, and the best chance of cracking 9, do I hear 10? Will depend on a few factors, including how quickly we get into that sunshine and how much sunshine we do see. But the best chance for 9 will be in the valley tomorrow. So we'll see how that comes to play out. But either way, a great Tuesday afternoon. We are going to be seeing some sunshine breaking through on Wednesday on the backside of this next system, which we will be watching to bring primarily rain. Cape Breton, Guysborough, and some showers back as far west as Halifax. Even Yarmouth could see a few showers from this. The wintry mix off to our north, but this is going to be bringing a lot of rain to eastern Newfoundland. A rainfall warning there on top of a very deep snowpack. Not great news for them. And then as we look ahead, we're also watching this system, which is going to be bringing in another wintry mix to the Maritimes on Thursday. Perhaps a few flakes for Nova Scotia on the northern edge of that system, and then eventually over to some showers. We'll go from showers back to flurries on Friday, especially into the afternoon as temperatures fall a little bit, and then watching a third system for Saturday night into Sunday. That one could also be bringing a little bit of snow, changing to some showers. So an active week, but we'll focus on the sunshine and the mild temps for Tuesday.
Definitely.
For sure. Okay, Ryan, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Coming up, breaking down the province's changes to the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. The province has introduced changes to the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act, saying it wants to deny what it calls vexatious information requests, which some critics are concerned about that will reduce government transparency. David Fraser is a privacy and access to information lawyer with the Halifax law firm McGinnis Cooper. Sir, for those who may not be following along too closely, generally speaking, why should the amendments to the access to information law matter to Nova Scotians?
Well, I think we need to be a little bit concerned and we need to be asking some significant questions. The first of which is why now? We're told that a larger, more comprehensive analysis and review of our Freedom of Information law is underway. But this kind of gets tucked into an omnibus bill, which is Bill 1 of this parliamentary session. Is it actually needed right now, and should it not be scrutinized within the broader context of reform and overhaul of the legislation to begin with? And I guess the second one is this out of line with what other provinces are doing? And the answer to that is generally no. Other provinces have added provisions in their Freedom of Information laws to deal with what are called frivolous, vexatious, or abusive requests, or requests that are overbroad, that can actually be quite burdensome on the offices within government departments that review access to information requests. But I've certainly heard some concern expressed that there's not enough opportunity for review of these. So an alternative proposal would be that the government department would actually have to ask the privacy commissioner for her concurrence on whether or not a request is vexatious, abusive, or otherwise problematic. And that would give at least an opportunity for the review office to chime in. And so it's not just an individual government department saying, oh, well, this is too much and this is too burdensome. And I think we also need to think that if some of these are too burdensome, that maybe some of these offices are being understaffed or under-resourced when it comes to the ability to respond to access to information requests in a timely way. We have to remember that the courts have called this legislation quasi-constitutional because it forces government transparency, which is integral to our system of democracy and holding governments to account. Mm-hmm. And it certainly does have the appearance of, and certainly I've heard critics suggesting that along with the amendments to the Auditor General Act, that this is the government actually trying to recoil from transparency and accountability.
Okay. Well, let's break some of this down a little bit because, you alluded to the fact there that access to information officers or staff might be getting bogged down with what they're calling vexatious, trivial, or frivolous requests. These changes, as we've pointed out, try to aim to reduce that, but who gets to then define vexatious, trivial, and frivolous, and why does that matter?
Well, so in the legislation, or at least in the bill, it's up to the government department or the head of the public body, as it's called in the legislation, to make that determination. And I would much rather an impartial third party look at the facts and make that determination, because it certainly is in the government department's self-interest to be able to shrug off requests that they don't want to answer.
So if a request does get turned down or someone applying doesn't get information, you mentioned appealing to the commission there. I gather there is a new 14-day deadline, much shorter than in the past. Given the backlog, is it even possible to get that done in 14 days?
Well, I'm guessing it's going to have to be. And so that will result in a reallocation of resources within the commissioner's office, which is already understaffed and under-resourced. So I would be concerned that having to respond so quickly, and quick responses are obviously a good thing, but having to do that could be detrimental to the other important work that office is doing.
It has been pointed out that while in opposition, the Premier wanted to bolster the role of the Commission by giving the Commissioner, that person, more power, in fact, order-making powers. But some are arguing these changes seem to be taking the act in the opposite direction. Is that fair to say?
It probably is. I guess we'll really have to wait and see what the overall review of the legislation ends up looking like. And the review seems to be a bit of a closed door review, so it may be a bit of a foregone conclusion. But I think one thing to note in my, I guess, decades of practicing in this area of law, opposition politicians are always in favor of access to information laws and are always in favor of expanding the powers of the independent review officer. But generally, when a politician becomes part of the governing party, that position changes. And so this is relatively consistent with what I've seen in other places and also in Nova Scotia when an opposition politician becomes a member of the government. But certainly the current premier is strongly on record in the past being in favor of and even going to court in order to take on the Stephen McNeil government with respect to confidentiality of withheld documents related to the ferry.
All right, Mr. Fraser, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
That's my pleasure. Take care.
Coming up, a show of support. Trudeau visits Ukraine to mark the 3rd anniversary of Russia's invasion.
And Pope Francis' health update. The 88-year-old remains hospitalized in critical condition. Welcome back. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is one of several world leaders in Ukraine marking the 3rd anniversary of the Russian invasion.
He pledged new aid and more military equipment and worked to rally support for the country. Chris Brown has more.
With the scent of U.S. betrayal in the air, Justin Trudeau came to Kyiv in a show of solidarity with Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky.
How important it is to continue to stand with Ukraine and figure out a way to create a just and lasting peace.
Trudeau was far from alone, but missing in action on this third anniversary of Russia's invasion was any senior representative of Donald Trump's administration. Though Trudeau did lead a virtual G7 meeting that included both Trump and Zelensky.
President Trump, we would really like to hear from you because all our people, all our families are very worried. Will there be support from America?
Trump has started negotiating with Russia directly, without Ukraine, claiming he believes Vladimir Putin wants peace, a notion openly scoffed at in Kyiv.
Putin is trying harder than ever to win the war on the ground. His goal remains Ukraine's capitulation.
For Canada's part, Trudeau announced it's sending Ukraine 25 more light armored vehicles. And using seized Russian assets as collateral, Canada will send the first installment of an eventual $5 billion to Ukraine.
Oui, c'est absolument possible.
Trudeau also opened up the possibility that Canada could have boots on the ground in the country as part of a post-war security guarantee.
When we establish the way we're going to keep a lasting peace, I can tell you I am certain that Canada will be involved, but we're not at that position yet.
Beyond the gathering on Kyiv's frozen Dnipro River, we found Ukrainians reluctantly coming to the same conclusion as the European leaders, that the war against Russia may have to be fought without U.S. help. A lot depends on how Europe will act now, said Vladislav. Will it stop looking to America and start making its own decisions? It looks like we've been played in some kind of game, says Victoria. And now Russia and America are dividing up our territories among themselves.
That's the CBC's Chris Brown in Kyiv.
U.S. President Donald Trump said he will go forward with a 25% tariff on most Canadian goods next week. Speaking to reporters at a White House news conference with the French president, Trump said Canada has ripped off the U.S. for too long and it's time to put a stop to it.
The tariffs are going forward on time, on schedule. This is an abuse that took place for many, many years. And I'm not even blaming the other countries that did this. I blame our leadership for allowing it to happen.
A conservative party has won the federal election in Germany. Its leader will now form a coalition government, though not with the far-right party that finished second. Friedrich Merz becomes chancellor at a challenging time for his country and for Europe as a whole. Abby Kuavasan explains.
The Chancellor-designate Friedrich Merz says foreign policy is a top priority for him. But first, his conservatives must work together with other parties to form a coalition government after winning about 30% of nationwide support in Sunday's federal election. He has ruled out working with the far-right AfD, which finished in second with about 20% support. But Merz has already put in a call to the third-place party. That's Chancellor Olaf Scholz's SPD. Part of that is to ensure a smooth transition, Merz said. Germany could see a center-left and center-right coalition government once again if these two parties join forces. Merz has said he wants negotiations to go quickly and a coalition government to be formed by Easter at the latest. That's in mid-April. He spoke of the challenges the country is facing. Merz said the transatlantic relationship is critical, but argued that if it's damaged, it's also to the detriment of the United States. He's prepared to find common ground and still sees Washington as a crucial partner, but is concerned that Washington went ahead with unilateral talks with the Kremlin to end the war in Ukraine. Support for Kyiv will continue under a Chancellor Merz, who insists that Ukrainians must be part of all negotiations to end Russia's war of aggression on their territory. He even suggested he'll greenlight the shipment of Taurus long-range missiles, which Chancellor Scholz has been reluctant to do. But both parties have made it clear that Germany needs to play a much larger role within Europe and on the world stage at a time when it cannot rely on the current White House. Abby Kuavasan, CBC News, Berlin.
The already fragile ceasefire in Gaza is growing ever more uncertain. Phase 1 is drawing to a close, but both sides say the exchange of Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners is not going according to plan. Now, Israel's expanding offensive in the occupied West Bank could become another major obstacle. Sasha Petrusik has the latest.
Israel's been ramping up its military activity in the occupied West Bank ever since the conflict in Gaza started 16 months ago, but especially over the past 5 or 6 weeks when the ceasefire went into effect. And that's included many troops, armored personnel carriers, airstrikes in some cases. And now we are seeing tanks for the first time, really in the past 20 years. These camps in the north, the refugee camps, are homes to descendants of those who were displaced way back in 1948 when Israel was first created. They've also been hotbeds of militant activity, including Hamas, and that's only been increasing over the course of the war in Gaza, partly because people have been attracted to that cause. That's why Israel says it really has to move in for its own security.
It's military operations taking place there against terrorists, and no other objectives but this one.
But as Israel has moved in, it has displaced 40,000 people from these areas, and there have been hundreds of deaths.
And I'm gravely concerned by the rising violence in the occupied West Bank by Israel settlers and other violations, as well as calls for annexation.
Israel's occupation of the West Bank and its military presence there has always been controversial with the UN. In fact, it's been declared illegal by the World Court. It's also raised a lot of anger and frustration among Palestinians because Israel is refusing to let go more than 600 Palestinian prisoners and detainees who were supposed to be exchanged for the 6 Israeli hostages released over the weekend. Israel says it's not releasing the Palestinians because every time these hostages are set free, Hamas puts on a show, a propaganda ceremony, and Israel has said that as long as that continues, it's not letting these prisoners go. All of this is endangering the ceasefire. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Pope Francis is still critically ill, but has shown a slight improvement in his health. The 88-year-old remains in hospital as he battles lung infection and other complications. Megan Williams has more from the Vatican.
Well, the latest Vatican health update said that the Pope slept through the night. He's rested. Treatment continues. On Saturday, when he had a prolonged respiratory crisis, he was given 2 units of blood to get the oxygen levels up in his blood and also to help it better coagulate. But the Vatican said that the Pope is showing early signs of kidney failure. It's not clear whether or not this has been caused by sepsis. Nonetheless, it's worrisome that another organ has been affected. Now, here at the Vatican, despite the rain, there are still thousands of pilgrims pouring through. This is the Holy Jubilee year. Many, of course, are disappointed that they're not being able to attend a Mass that Pope Francis is presiding over, and many are very, very concerned.
All of us are praying for his good health to get well soon and return back to St. Peter's Basilica again.
I hope that he will survive this situation.
People who aren't even Catholic say that this Pope means a lot to them. He is a Pope who has somehow spoken beyond the Catholic Church itself. He's responded to important themes in the world today in a way that is meaningful for a lot of people. There will be a prayer session here in St. Peter's Square where crowds are expected to come out and pray that the Pope gets better. Megan Williams, CBC News, the Vatican.
Some Hyundai drivers report paint peeling off their cars in big chunks. Even when it happens to relatively new cars, owners say getting help has been difficult. It's a problem happening across the world and specifically to white Hyundais. Ithel Musa with the Go Public team has more.
When Armando Tusi bought his brand new Hyundai Sonata in 2016, he never imagined it would look like this in less than 10 years.
It's kind of embarrassing.
Tusi says he's tried contacting Hyundai Canada and his local dealership, but he says
no one wants to take ownership. No one wants to take accountability.
According to Hyundai Canada's warranty program, paint is only covered for 3 years or 60,000 kilometers. This auto expert, who's seen photos of Tusi's car, says paint on vehicles should last much longer.
I believe the paint job should last for as long as you own the vehicle.
The culprit says this expert is likely delamination or the loss of adhesion.
The paint consists of 4 coatings, 4 layers of paint. And if they're not applied properly or it's the incorrect formulation, one will actually separate, peel away from the other layer.
Peeling, flaking. Hyundais with peeling paint have been reported across the globe. And curiously, nearly all of them are white, with thousands of drivers sharing their experiences online, including this Australian.
The other day, a child was walking past the car and said to their mum, what's wrong with that lady's car?
The paint on Nixon's used 2015 hatchback started to peel in late 2019, but getting help fixing it has been impossible, she says.
I don't feel protected as a consumer.
Hyundai Canada says vehicles experiencing manufacturing paint issues are extremely rare, and Hyundai vehicles undergo rigorous testing to meet industry standards. Hyundai USA is offering a white paint warranty extension for certain models. When Go Public reached out, Hyundai Canada said some models sold in Canada are also eligible. Still, owners are not just embarrassed to be seen in these vehicles, they're angry. In Quebec, a proposed class action lawsuit has been filed against the automaker, but that will take time. Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
A group of Canadian doctors is warning about the influence the fossil fuel industry has over climate change education. A new report says the oil and gas companies are funding a growing number of resources that are being used in Canadian classrooms. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson has the details.
This recently retired teacher says she was happy to use materials on climate change provided by a third-party organization.
It has the government of Alberta's logo on it.
But Tylene Appel says she noticed something she found suspect.
The materials focused on, say, individual actions, like wearing a sweater to stay warm. I noticed a lack of any kind of collective action or systemic change.
A new report by the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment alleges that the oil and gas industry is subtly influencing climate change education, in part by funding environmental organizations that give presentations, materials, and field trips to schools.
You will see occasionally references to the burning of coal, oil and gas as a driver of climate change, but the role of the industry is downplayed.
The report also calls out industry for so-called greenwashing.
Some of these companies fund tree planting initiatives. How's this a bad thing?
Imperial Oil is promoting tree planting. Tree planting is wonderful, but we also know that this industry driving the climate crisis is having a devastating impact on forests globally.
The companies named in the report either declined interview requests or did not respond. But an organization that supplies materials to Alberta schools denied being influenced by fossil fuel funders. In a statement, Inside Education says, our educational approach is centered around fostering critical thinking, not promoting a specific agenda. The report's authors are calling on all levels of government to get involved in funding and providing high-quality climate education for students whose lives will be impacted by climate change. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
A Canadian icon is looking tarnished in some people's eyes lately. The icon is Wayne Gretzky. And what's dimming his luster is his connection to Donald Trump. The CBC's Sam Sampson has the story.
Emerging from Team USA's bench, Wayne Gretzky throws the American team a thumbs up before representing Canada as the team's honorary captain. Despite a Canadian win, Gretzky's actions hit a sore spot.
He couldn't even be bothered to wear the Team Canada jersey.
Wayne Gretzky is a sainted figure in this country for good reason. He's the greatest hockey player in the sport that we care the most about.
But how close he is to Donald Trump at this moment, and him being chosen as an honorary captain for this event, those two things didn't add up for me.
Gretzky has spent time at U.S. President Donald Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago. He had a prime seat at the inauguration. Trump has even floated Gretzky should run for Prime Minister of Canada, soon to be Governor of Canada, a nod to Trump's desire to make Canada the 51st state. The NHL says its decision to make Gretzky Canada's honorary captain is because he's one of the greatest and most respected players in the history of the game. And he's a proud born and raised Canadian. Gretzky hasn't commented.
The silence from Wayne Gretzky, I think, is disappointing for a lot of hockey fans.
Tyler Yaremchuk was at the Four Nations game and covers the Edmonton Oilers.
These players are going to have their politics, but when it's Wayne Gretzky and he's supporting Donald Trump in this way publicly, that's where it gets disappointing because he's held to such a higher standard.
Especially in Edmonton.
He was the franchise.
Gretzky won 4 Stanley Cups with the Edmonton Oilers. He's part of this city's cultural fabric. But that could change. Hockey fan Grant Preet has more than 7,000 signatures on a petition to change the name Wayne Gretzky Drive.
He's abandoned Canada, and I don't think that we should be, treating him as a hero by having things named after him.
A name change would have to get city approval. A cultural change would take a lot more. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Edmonton.
So yeah, salt is still kind of scarce out there.
But you got Mother Nature's salt, the
Gonna
sun.
Yeah, it's going to help for sure. I mean, even days like this where the temperatures are at freezing or just below freezing, the sun doing its thing with that angle getting higher and higher in the sky. And really, we'll see quite a bit of melting on Tuesday. So you'll be able to go home and chip out some of those ice blocks.
Stop sliding in the driveway, right?
Need that.
Yeah, for sure. Have a look at our viewer picture of the day. We'll start there first. We're going to zoom in on the Halifax area and beautiful Kearney Lake. And this is a great spot. Lois, beautiful sunset shot. Thanks so much.
Stripes almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little ice in the water there too, huh?
And by the end of the week, that sun, by the way, will be setting after 6 p.m. So we're getting there.
Progress
by
is
inch.
being made. Yeah.
Yes. Have a look at our forecast for Tuesday. And again, it is going to feel very spring-like. 6, 7, 8. Do I hear 9? The best chances are going to be in the valley for that. And if we, really get into a mainly sunny day, which the Canadian model is leaning towards, who knows? Maybe a double digit out there. We'll see. As we look into the future with that future tracker, you can see a couple of flakes overnight. Then we're into that sunshine. Then watching that next system approaching from the south. This will bring heavy rain to Newfoundland. Looks like we're going to get into some of the outer bands of rain, primarily Cape Breton for Wednesday.
All right, thanks for that, Ryan. Well, every year around this time, hundreds of thousands of visitors show up at a beach in eastern India.
It's the annual nesting for the endangered olive ridley sea turtles. This location is seeing a record number of them with more than 700,000.
Wow.
The olive ridley turtles are named after their heart-shaped olive green shells. Each female lays more than 100 eggs in a hole, and they hatch in 50 days.
Impressive.
Very cool.
That's it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Good night.
Good night.